everybody. I'm Kim Bender, the Executive Director of the Heurich House Museum in DuPont Circle, although sitting in my apartment in Logan Circle right now. We're the historic home of a German-American brewer named Christian Heurich, who had the largest brewery in DC that sat at the site of the Kennedy Center. It operated for almost a century from 1872 until 1956. And now the historic home that we operate out of has nearly intact interiors from the late 19th and early 20th century. So it's like a time capsule. And we use Heurich's own experiences as an immigrant as inspiration and try to honestly explore what it takes to achieve the American dream and create a just path to success for modern, small, creative entrepreneurs. One day when we're all out of our houses, come by and you can normally have, normally tonight we would be having a happy hour in our garden, maybe with Senate beer, or you can take a tour of the house a couple times a week usually. So hopefully you guys will come by. So for attendees, if you have questions, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can post them in there. Chris Van Orden, who's our moderator today, will go through and try to get to as many of them as possible. We're really like to encourage you guys to post as many questions as you have. So this can be more of a discussion, not just a lecture. And also we've posted some links and information about the panelists in the chat. So you can click on those to learn more about what they're doing. On a personal note, I'm super excited to hear from these business owners tonight, who I have watched grow and have admired for many years. Once upon a time, before Mallory had her own store, she was on our property in Brewmaster Studios in our carriage house. She is actually our longest running Brewmaster Studios tenant. And Nick's DGS Delicatessen, which is in DuPont Circle, was probably the place I spent the most money on food. Thor and Leah from Right Proper are my personal friends and also have brewed Senate beer for the Heurich House. And Jeff, who's a new friend, I'm drinking his pear brandy right now. So I'm excited to hear what they have to say. I'm happy to introduce Chris Van Orden, who is our moderator. He is a small business consultant who serves food and beverage companies in the DMV region. He has expertise in financial planning, international trade, operations management, vendor and distribution relations. He works with DC-based nonprofits like SB Works and LEDC, as well as the Virginia Small Business Development Centers, to provide mission-critical assistance to startup and growth stage businesses. And he's also a Heurich House board member. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris and have a great conversation, guys.
Appreciate you organizing this great event, and thanks to everybody for attending. I hope you'll all be treating this as a happy hour, as I think most of us are on the panelist side. So this evening we're going to be hearing from 4 great DC area entrepreneurs. I'm going to go around the horn and give a quick little bio for everybody before we dig in. So Mallory Shelter is the owner of Shelter in DC and the designer behind Mallory Shelter Jewelry. Her storefront, which opened in 2018, focuses on independently designed jewelry and accessories and carries over 90% female-owned brands. Thanks for joining us. Next, I have Leah Cheston, who's the co-founder and co-owner of Right Proper Brewing Company. She's also current president of DC Brewers Guild and on the board of directors of the Brewers Association. In a previous life, she was sommelier at restaurant over in the West End. Thanks. Nick Wiseman is a 3rd-generation Washingtonian. He's a co-founder of the Middle Eastern fast casual restaurants, Little Sesame. Nick lives with his wife, Leah, and their daughter and Josie in Tacoma Park, Maryland. And then finally, Jeff Harner is co-owner with his brother-in-law, Nate Gronendijk of Sangfroid Distilling. Sangfroid is a small artisan distillery focused on fruit brandies, rye whiskey, and Dutch gin. He splits his time between rehabilitating an abandoned orchard in Western Maryland, growing apples, pears, and plums for their brandies, and his day job with the federal government. Thanks everybody for joining us for this. Really appreciate it. So I'm gonna just kick in and we're gonna let them sort of share their experiences with everybody on running a small business in these very crazy times. So first and foremost, how have you changed your business model to adjust to the current conditions? You know, what are some creative ways that you've adapted? And whoever wants to jump in first, please be bold. first one?
Sure, I'll start.
Thank you.
So we are a small distillery and we're new. And a lot of the changes that were happening even before coronavirus hit were kind of, for us, propelled by some changes on the regulatory front, where small distilleries are starting to be allowed in Maryland to serve cocktails. So my brother-in-law and I, we made the decision to kind of rearrange our tasting room and build the infrastructure to actually have more or less a bar so that we could serve cocktails in our own facility, as opposed to just small samples of our spirits, which is what we had been doing for the first about 12, 13 months of being open. And 2 weeks after we opened our new tasting room, Maryland was shut down. So we had to pivot pretty quickly to figure out what we were going to do now, because best laid plans did not turn out as we had hoped. So one of the things that as a small distillery we were able to do is pivot pretty quickly to starting to produce hand sanitizer. I would say even before it became really widely clear that this was going to last for a long time, we started getting requests from healthcare providers, local city, county governments, and lots of folks that are in kind of postal delivery business, Amazon, USPS, UPS, FedEx, those kinds of people started reaching out asking for sanitizer. So since we were small, almost on a dime, we could turn our production processes towards making sanitizer. So for a distillery like us, who focuses on these kind of really niche products that take a lot of care and a lot of time, it's very different than making a high proof, basically flavorless product like what you would use for sanitizer. So we did have to make some changes, but more or less it just takes a little bit more time, a little bit more effort, and a little bit more money to produce. But we've been able for the short term to do that. It's not, we're just trying to cover our costs, and we donated probably the first 20 or 30 gallons that we made, and which for us is a large amount, but we're not sure how long this is going to go on. And I would say I'd spend half an hour at least every day answering emails of requests for more sanitizer. And that's been nonstop since the beginning, late February, beginning of March. So I think for the meantime, we're going to continue to do it. And that is going to have some effects on production in the other parts of our business, and being shut down certainly affects our new tasting room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you've clearly had to rethink entirely not only how you reach people, but what you were producing, which is
sure
a little different than what some of our other people are doing. Some of them it's just a matter of being able to reach their audience, but I mean, there's no blueprint for all this. Mallory, do you have any kind of innovative ways that you've been able to reach people in these times?
Yeah, so I have a storefront. We sell primarily jewelry, and jewelry's kind of a hard thing to sell online, only because it's really something that people want to try on and see in person, and especially at the price point that we sell, I wouldn't call it an impulse buy. So that became very hard very quickly when we had to translate to online sales. So we've been playing around with virtual consultations. So either via FaceTime or like Instagram DM, to be totally honest. You know, I'm the new model of Mallory Shelter jewelry and all of the brands we carry. So I've just been trying things on, making sure people understand the scale and how it looks when you're wearing it and things like that. People have been really receptive to it. So, you know, our sales have actually remained, I mean, they've definitely dropped, but they have not completely gone away. So people are still buying, but it's just, you know, we're trying to pivot and communicate with people in a different way, and make sure they're still getting kind of that curated experience, even if it's not in person.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that's tough when you lose that in-person touch. And yeah, I know that's a big part for you all, since you operate a brewery. You have a production facility, but you also have a brew pub, which is, I've been at Right Proper countless times, and I know a lot of it is about the physical being there, the community side of it for you. So what have you done to be able to reach your customers now?
Right, so we pivoted to takeout and delivery at the brew pub. And, you know, we were already set up for beer to go, which is a little bit more than some restaurants were, I would say. And we already had a big cheese program. And so we were trying to take advantage of that and expand the cheese. We turned the front into sort of a market as much as we could. We were trying to do prepared foods and packaged foods. But what we found is people really just think of us as a restaurant. And so it's that the whole shopping part is not happening right now. They're just ordering online in advance and coming in and picking it up and leaving, which is fine. It's hard to maximize the sales in that way, and that it's really just those takeout orders. So it's really just a small portion of what we could do on compared to an on-premise restaurant. Now the production brewery has been able to take advantage of delivery in the city, and that has helped a lot. And that's been great. And it's also direct to consumer. So the margins are a little bit better there.
So some of the regulatory changes, you've been able to make a new model work in a way that just was not possible before.
Correct. And actually delivery was allowed. It's just something that none of the breweries took advantage of because it just seemed it wasn't our business model before, and suddenly it is. And now it's probably something that will continue after this as well. We are selling cocktails and wine to go, so we are taking advantage of that extended ability through the ABRA. Was pretty quick to allow, which is great.
Interesting. And Nick, I know that you all operate some spaces that are in areas that are normally very high traffic, and there is no foot traffic these days. So what have you guys done to be able to get out in front of folks?
Yeah, so we operate, fast casual restaurants that serve as sort of the downtown central business district. So pretty much overnight, that audience evaporated. And we, a few days before the actual mandated shutdown of restaurants, we opted to close on like the 13th of March or so. And my wife works in DC public school food. And sort of with the impending school closure, it was pretty clear there was going to be a giant need to feed the student population. They had mobilized, emergency feeding sites across the city, leveraging their existing sort of food service partners at Sodexo and DC Central Kitchen. But they were going to be providing only like one meal a day. And a lot of these kids, 70% actually of DC public school students rely on school food for their primary source of nutrition. So we knew there was going to be, especially with the possibility of this sort of enduring through summer, that there was going to be almost a 6-month period here where the kids were going to be in real need of additional sort of feeding sites. So we worked with the city networks and pretty much overnight mobilized. That's by Monday of that week. We turned one whole kitchen into sort of a program we called Meals for the City, where we were producing 500 meals a day for folks across Ward 7 and Ward 8. We partnered with like a community organization called Dreaming Out Loud, which had a lot of partnerships and sort of community network down in Ward 7. And they were our primary partner in sort of the distribution side. And we were able to leverage our space and team in a safe way to be able to sort of serve this new need that had emerged pretty quickly. So, we ran that program for about 6 weeks out of one shop. We were then sort of to reconnect with our existing audience. We launched CPG packaged hummus. Hummus is sort of the center of what we do. And so we've now sort of looked to a lot of the CSA and grocery bundling models that have sort of agitated grocery. The traditional grocery model have exploded. I heard from a major CSA, 4P Foods, that they had seen 800% growth or demand, 800% increase in demand for their products since the crisis had hit. So we started looking and partnering with sort of disruptive grocery models to sell our hummus. So now we have an entire store dedicated to just like hummus production at scale. And we've also layered on top of it like a small direct-to-consumer provisions line of sort of other products we make in-house. So we've been able to sort of mobilize the two stores in very different ways. One, is short-term filling a need that the city has and, serving the community. And the other is sort of more enduring channel that we think can exist after this ends.
That's great. Yeah. It's heartening to hear how everybody has found a way to keep out in front of people, keep trying to keep commerce flowing. Now, there's no sugarcoating it. These are not good times to be a small business owner. It's tough right now. And so I think there's recognition that there's a need for support here. Have you all had any success accessing resources to support your pivot, whether it's governmental, nonprofit, within your industry? Are there any kind of tools that you found particularly helpful as you're trying to rethink how you run your business?
Yeah, I'll jump in again quickly because I just finished and I'll segue back right into me. So off the break, we sort of leverage the goodwill of our community. You know, we have a pretty strong investor pool. We've done a few projects before and leading up to Little Sesame. And so sort of reached back out to that network because we didn't really want to outlay any additional resources to be able to make this happen. So that weekend, we were able to raise some private money from donors, basically to kickstart the program. And then simultaneously, we launched a gift card campaign, like the Tom Shoe model, which was sort of buy one, give one. And sort of through our community sold that and was extremely successful with that. Within the first week, we basically funded almost a month of payroll for our team, which we were able to keep everyone on board for an entire month just through that program. And then luckily for us, you know, World Central Kitchen, Jose Andres' effort for emergency feeding across the country, launched a simultaneous program that was able to turn restaurants back on and serve a similar need that we were serving. And so we plugged into their network and have secured funding to do 750 meals a day now with them. So now we have sort of quote unquote institutional money. They're getting a lot of their funding through FEMA. So it's pretty secure funding indefinitely. So fortunately, we've been able to sort of commit to our team and then commit to the community that will be there indefinitely as long as this persists. So we've tapped into a few different revenue opportunities and, you know, and then again, sort of leverage the goodwill of our community to really to kickstart this whole thing off.
That's great. Yeah. I think, you know, knowing where some of that, who has the ear of some of the bigger resource providers and being able to tap into some of those partnerships to make things happen can be really helpful in these times. I mean, everybody has a different capacities and skills. So relying on others to bolster your own efforts is a really good tactic. Anybody else resources? And it doesn't have to be money. I know this is not supposed to be a session about PPP or IDLE or any of those things. I know we can, talk about that for hours if we want to, but that's not going to be that fruitful.
So should we not talk about that, Chris?
You can please weigh in, but ideally we'll hear some things that work as well that,
Sure. So, you know, we got the PPP, we got the IDLE is great because it is a grant. So that was a nice help. The PPP, we expanded our hours a little bit, utilizing that to bring back 1 or 2 staff members. We're still proceeding with caution because we're not sure about that forgiveness part and we're not looking to take on a loan if we don't have to. So we're excited about it, but it's a safety net, I think, but it's proceeding with caution there. And, you know, beyond that, we've applied for the micro grants, hadn't heard from those yet either.
Yes, I know the micro grants that timing is coming up soon. So obviously the infrastructure for any kind of disaster relief stuff never could have anticipated all of this. And that's part of the issue for all of this is not localized. We don't have the bandwidth built in to handle a nationwide issue like this. So I think turning to, you know, if you have, we're able to access some federal resources, that's great. But sometimes it's as much as, hey, having a resource from a trade association. You know, I know that you being on the board of the Brewers Association, they've been really out in front of things, trying to just share some best practices so that not everybody has to figure out things on their own. I mean, it's just information sharing sometimes is really helpful.
That's true. A lot of the associations and, you know, the guilds they're struggling as well, you know, because their lifeline was in events. And so they don't really have money for small businesses, but they do have a lot of resources and the ear of lobbyists, and they're able to kind of get things passed sometimes that is really helpful.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Well, and this is something that Nick kind of alluded to earlier as well. What kind of support have you all seen from your community, your audience? You've all spent a lot of your time trying to build strong connections with your customer base. What sort of things have you been hearing from them as this time when you don't have that opportunity to connect with them one-on-one? Jeffrey Mallory, I'll let you start off here.
I'll start. I've felt a great sense of community throughout all of this. I mean, of course, immediately after closing down, we got flooded with very nice emails and calls from customers, but you know, both among business owners, like I've been really, really happy with how many people have been coming together just to help each other throughout this. And I spearheaded a DC Shop Small campaign, which happened last Saturday. It was a small business Saturday that went virtual, and we had over 130 businesses participated. We generated over $200,000 in online sales for vendors, and I've been hearing from people saying it was one of their best sales days ever, like since being open, or at least since being closed. So, you know, that was very promising. Of course, there was a lot of buzz and, you know, encouragement to shop on that one day, but I do think people are still spending. And I think that there's a lot of people who are rallying behind small businesses right now. And as much as we can leverage that or kind of ride that, you know, I think is good.
Yes, absolutely. I think, yeah, knowing that the goodwill is out there, that there's a desire among those who still have the opportunity and means to go out and support local brands. It's just a matter of finding a way to do so and bringing together that collective public will. Jeff, have you had any, I know that you've gotten a lot of the interactions you've gotten have been on the pivot, but have you still had some any kind of interesting connections with the community when it comes to your core product line?
Yeah, so one of the regulatory changes at the county level in Prince George's in Maryland has been to allow us to do online sales, like a lot of other jurisdictions have been loosening those restrictions. So we've gotten a ton of our people, our regular customers, are able to come and they see us. We can give them hand sanitizer and they're making orders. So it's hopefully. It's not a way to build market share, but it is a way to at least serve our community and our immediate customers who already know about us. So that's been tremendous, and they've been super supportive. And we're still trying to figure out ways to kind of thank them in addition to just a nod and some hand sanitizer. But I also wanted to mention that the guilds, both the national, state, for distilleries, have been very out front in working with the regulatory agency, the federal regulatory agencies, to be able to allow us to make sanitizer. And that's something that happened almost at warp speed, getting new legislation that passed, and I think it was the CARES Act. That was a tremendous help for our industry and the recipients of what we'd produce. Yeah,
and that's, you know, some of it is innovation on the business parts, but then some of it is regulatory, is just the ability to do those types of things.
Right.
So since all of this has been is as a result of a health pandemic, what efforts have you taken to keep both your team and your customers safe during all of this? I know that high touch businesses, it can be difficult.
I'll start. So my team, I've been able to keep on my entire team, which is great. None of us are coming in contact with each other. So I'm handling all order shipments, and they're each respectively doing kind of online and customer service. Customer wise, I mean, we stopped doing any kind of in-person pickup once the shelter in place started. I've been shocked by the number of people who continue to ask. But yeah, we've just made it a policy that we can't make exceptions to that. We've been shipping as fast as we can. All shipments are going out via regular mail, so there's not so much we can do on that part. But yeah, I think the main things are just keeping our team separate, which is tricky and challenging, but it is what it is. And then just avoiding any kind of customer interaction.
Has anybody else had any kind of issues or found ways that have been more effective? I think, especially since we have some other business owners on this front who are still figuring out process type things. You know, some of you are still pretty active in these times and trying to find a way to still do it safely.
No, we're relying a lot on the local regulations, face mask and gloves for handling the food. We are fortunate here that our space is very large, so we only need one employee in the kitchen and one employee in the front, and so it kind of is spaced out that way. We're also starting to, you know, think about plans as things do open back up, and assuming some restrictions are going to be in place. So we, you know, have our tables 6 feet apart, and are lucky that we have a good amount of seats with that still, and starting to work on those plans for reopening.
I can jump in. So yeah, we basically decided we worked a lot early on with World Central Kitchen, who'd already mobilized some of these sort of community kitchens that were doing high volume still. And so we extended the day really long and broke into multiple shifts. So we have like 2 production crews that stagger, and then a packing crew that just comes in and packages all the food, and then a crew that does distribution. So it's no more than 3 people per crew. And then they're working just, again, it's like almost like a 15-hour day, just spread out throughout the day. You know, it seems like 2 of the highest risk areas are grocery and transit. And so we are offering to buy our groceries through our purveyors for any of the staff that are still working. And then we're offering private rides for them as well. We even offer them to buy bikes for them if they wanted, just as a perk and as a thank you for their continued service. So you know, then I'm happy to share with everyone, but anyone operating kitchens, World Central Kitchen did develop a really strong protocol about how to operate to meet all the regulations, but also just in a safe way, given everything that's sort of now known about coronavirus and how to operate around it. I know as this was taking shape in early mid-March, sort of everyone was scrambling to come up with new protocol. But they have a really comprehensive guide to sort of how to reshape kitchen operations to make it work. So happy to share that with everyone after the call.
That's great. Thanks, Nick. Yes, I know the National Restaurant Association has just put something out recently too, which is very comprehensive as well. And it's just best practices. You know, none of this is, you know, guidance per se in terms of regulatory issues, but it's just making sure that the businesses are doing everything they can to be responsible actors in this space. Just to dwell on regulatory issues one more time, we had a question come in from Kevin Tracy, who asked, for the alcohol manufacturers, do you think this will end up being an anti-prohibition? Like, is there any way to put the genie back in the bottle and tighten regulations back up?
Hopefully not, right? There have been talks that you know, what this will look like on the long term for the 3-tier system. Well, some of these, I know that a lot of business owners would like to see a lot of these things stay in place, and now can argue that we've been able to do it in a responsible manner. And so a lot of the fears that were out there before, you know, to us seem like those fears are not being realized, which is a good thing, I think, to show that we can do these things responsibly.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I know it's, Jeff, go ahead.
So I was just going to add, Kentucky is now allowing direct shipping of spirits, and that's a big deal. Not just because there are so many bourbon distilleries in Kentucky that are producing, you know, 75% of the bourbon in the country, but because Kentucky is pretty far behind the curve in terms of the progressivism in terms of alcohol laws in their state. I mean, there were still dry counties in Kentucky. So I think, and that's a permanent change. So I think the ball is just going to keep rolling in the direction of more restrictions being taken away.
Yeah, I think it's important. There are regulations that clearly are very important right now, but yes, it's going to be hard to put some of those back in the bottle. It's going to be very interesting when we kind of phase out of all of this. And we'll talk a little bit about what that phase out might look like, what reopening might look like a little bit later. But for now, we've already covered a number of the initiatives and efforts that you have done on this front, but ways that you've given back to the community or done some interesting ways to connect with your community. I should say right now, the beer that I am drinking is the Right Proper beer that they did. The recipe was developed via a poll with the community. So it was a very interesting way to connect with the community. We've heard about the hand sanitizer, Small Business Saturday, the Dreaming Out Loud, and some of the programs there. Are there any other ways that either you've given back to the community or found new and interesting ways to engage now that everybody's consumer behavior is just completely shifted? Nobody? Sorry, I know we've covered a lot of ground already.
I'll go. We have, Instagram is the key for us right now. So we've become really, really, really transparent, both via Instagram and through our email communications about how we're running in real time. But we've been really exploring both advertising via Instagram and also just how to engage the community a bit better. So again, we've been doing those trunk shows that I mentioned earlier. We've been using it as a platform to shed light on some of the designers we carry in more detail. So, how they're working, their process, just more about them in general. We've been actually using it as an opportunity to work with brands that we carry, but obviously we don't carry all of their products, to test some new products and just do a limited time offer or do a small discount or something like that, just to see, how people respond to them. But I would say the primary focus, it always was a priority before, but we've really shifted to be primarily focused on Instagram as a means of communication with our customers.
Yes, and I think the use of social media and just people, that's how you can reach people right now. It's meeting them where they're at, and then we'll see when all of this thaws out, how much of that sticks around.
Yeah.
This is something, again, because a lot of the people on this call are themselves either small business owners or people in that space already. Do you think that the pandemic has given the public a better sense of what it means to run a small business in the DC region, sort of pulled the veil back a little bit?
I think so. I think people are certainly more in tune to it than they ever were. It's really not, we've been just really blown away by the community support and, people that the first couple of weeks were calling and asking if they could pay for a party a year from now. Just, they wanted to pay a deposit for events in the future or buy gift cards. We've also focused a lot on our staff. And kind of using our, what voice we do have to help them out. So we started a furloughed employee fund. We did a fundraiser for them, sharing any food, as Nick mentioned, with our staff as well. But also relied heavily on social media to engage. It does seem people are home and able to engage more. But I do think in a good way, it has put a spotlight on small businesses and how important they are for the community, I think.
Right. I think, it can be a bit of a black box for people who may not have owned a business before to know what exactly it takes. And in these times, people feel these strong connections with small businesses locally, but they're getting a peek behind the curtain in terms of what it actually means in the day-to-day. It's, it's not the easiest way to make a living, obviously, but you all have done a good job, running your businesses so far. So, not that this is exactly a relaxing time to be thinking long-term, but how have you used this time to sort of plan for the future, uncertain though it may be? What are some sort of ways that you're kind of trying to use this time to think about your business?
For us, I think it's brought up online sales a lot more. I think I calculated in the past year before we closed, online sales are about 5 to 7% of our business, and now they're 100%. So not that that will replace the in-store option, but I do think that we found a way to either reach new clients and customers who are not in the DC area, or still be able to engage with our existing customers. Again, it's hard for us a little bit because we sell luxury products at a higher price point, but I do think that clearly there's a way to do it and people are open to doing it. And I think that for a while after this, people will continue to probably prefer online shopping. And so I think, I've thought a lot about how we continue to translate that in-store experience online, and continue to be able to offer, just higher end customer service and that real one-on-one interaction, but virtually.
Right. And Nick, do you mind talking a little bit about sort of how you're moving towards the consumer packaged goods space, for instance, just as another line of business that you would have been thinking about, but taking this opportunity to move, make some major steps in that direction?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, we clearly grocery is going to be being disrupted in a major way. Things like Instacart and these grocery bundling services, and then farms working together through these sort of cooperative CSA models that were doing like direct to consumer deliveries. So I think there was this agitation that was already happening in the market, and this has just sort of expedited that by, many, many years. And so, we sort of one of the, focuses of our business, like as I said, is hummus, which is one of the fastest growing categories in grocery anyway. People are looking for alternative proteins, of which hummus is one. So, it's actually growing 6 times faster than any other category in grocery. So we saw an opportunity there, but not necessarily through traditional grocery route. The onboarding process, actually Whole Foods put into a freeze on product for 3 months. So there wasn't even an opportunity for us to get into a third-party retailer like Whole Foods. So we sort of started working on our own packaged hummus, and there's obviously some inherent challenges with shelf life. But we sort of reached out and started building the relationships with the CSA and grocery bundling models, and now we're selling a few thousand units a week already. In the first couple of weeks, and it seems like there's a lot of growth opportunity there. So people are I think there's a real opportunity in that people are like craving, product with transparency from producers they trust right now. I think there's a real opportunity for small businesses to sort of fill that need. But I think it's sort of understanding new distribution channels that people feel comfortable in. So I think, again, I do think there's a real opportunity. It's just going to shift. And again, I don't think anyone knows exactly how sort of the grocery landscape is going to change, but it's going to change. And I think we're trying to sort of be as nimble as possible and sort of lean on our smallness to be able to be agile, so that we can sort of continue to make moves slightly ahead of the curve.
Yeah, that's great. And Jeff, I know you mentioned early on that your products are sort of a long game plan in general. So do you mind talking a little bit about how you kind of are managing your sort of various timelines with the immediate need for your hand sanitizer products with your sort of long range planning, if we can even call that right now? Sure.
So aged spirits take time in a barrel to age, and earlier this year, end of last year, we just released the first barrels of our aged apple brandy and aged rye whiskey. So those were between 9 months and 12 months old. So fairly young, but still takes time. And particularly for a small business, that's a huge investment up front. So we're still able to fill barrels now. We've adjusted our production schedule so that we're not doing nothing but whiskey and apple brandy during the week. It's kind of like a half and half schedule. So we're still able to fill barrels, and we're trying to fill as many as we can. There are some hiccups in the supply chain because barrels have become pretty scarce, because barrel mills have shut down in most states, and there are only a handful of them that are making any kind of volume in the country. So For now, we're in good shape, but depending on how long this lasts and where barrel mills open up, there could be some bottlenecks down the road, and we'll address that as it comes. If we have to reuse barrels and treat our spirits as something else because of federal labeling requirements, then we can address that down the road. But for now, we can more or less continue with our current trajectory, with just a slight disruption in our production schedule.
Right, and I think that just shows how interrelated all this is. You know, if your supply chain hits one hiccup along the way, if it's a critical component such as barrels for making some of these spirits,
right,
that's you have to find a way to work around it or change what you're doing. Before we sort of get into the sort of phasing out of the current times, Nick, were you trying to weigh in there? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in. I have a positive story to share on like supply chain.
Oh,
stuff
good.
That,
yeah.
You know, we've highlighted. We work with a single producer for chickpeas out in Montana. He grows on 5,000 acres, and we actually had received a 6,000 pound shipment right before the shutdown. UPS had lost it for a couple weeks, which is kind of a funny story, but it showed up literally the day before we closed, and that is almost like a $15,000 shipment of chickpeas. And so we were basically, we're going to sit on $15,000 of inventory for a long time. But because we had this long standing relationship, and because, you know, him and I had sort of built this, you know, strong bond. And again, we sort of weathered a few storms together before. He offered to front the chickpeas to us indefinitely, which, you know, again, in our cash flow business, that where cash was gone, that was huge for us. So just the value of those kind of relationships, again, paid a lot of dividends in this time when, you know, coming out of pocket 15,000, you know, especially when our investors were saying hoard resources, would have been almost impossible. So again, value of strong relationships on the supply chain really paid off for us.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody else have any other stories, positive or negative, on the sort of supply chain, getting your product sort of everything you need to actually deliver a product to the public? And it's totally fine.
I mean, I touched on it a little bit earlier, but I don't know how many people are familiar with jewelry buying, but usually you buy upfront a couple months ahead of time, and then you get your product usually in about 3 to 4 months, since we focus primarily on handmade pieces. So similar to Nick, we got a lot of shipments in the week that we closed, and it is a lot of money to sit on. We usually carry anywhere from like $150,000 to $200,000 in inventory in our shop. So that's a scary number to have floating out there. But, you know, people have been really nimble. And I think, you know, like I was saying about brands giving us pieces to test out that we don't normally carry, we've seen a lot of that. I've had people just shipping me product to try out and put on our website for a few weeks. And if it doesn't sell, then I send it back and no damage done. So I think people who are staying afloat are realizing that we have to get a little bit creative right now. And yeah, we're trying everything. But I mean, I've been really encouraged and inspired by the brands we work with, and even brands we have never worked with who have reached out, just presenting creative ways to be able to sell their work.
Yeah, it's very heartening to hear about this sort of value of those relationships, that, you know, one small business to another, this sort of camaraderie that's built, that, yeah, it's everyone's working extremely hard and doing their, you know, level best to try and do right by their partners. So it is nice when you hear those stories. It's a little ray of hope in these times. So we had a question come in from Melissa Gold. She said, I feel a lot of celebrities and influencers have started engaging directly with the public since all this started. Not everyone loved partnering with them in the, what she calls before time, but have you considered how you could use outside forces for brand ambassadors to reach new audiences? So using this time to kind of grow your audience in a direction that maybe it hadn't been before.
I mean, that's a little bit tricky. I think influencers, at least what I've read, have gotten a little bit of a bad rap right now because they seem to be a little tone deaf. I mean, in the past we haven't totally explored it. We've kind of had mixed results with my personal brand. It doesn't tend to drive a whole lot of sales. It does drive things like followers and whatnot, but I have never seen a direct sales boost from engaging with them. But I will say, we're kind of the mindset that nothing's off the table. So if it seems like if it's a avenue that would work for us, then sure. But I don't know, I guess, if influencers are the right avenue at this time to pursue.
All right. Yeah, I think it's a interesting time, especially since everyone's going more online. But the rules are being rewritten weekly. So yeah, we'll see what everybody winds up employing to try and continue, reaching their customers. So to that end, there's another question that came in from Chad Susky of WDCEP. He said, do you see the immediate changes to your business model, such as online sales, direct delivery, new products, staying with you for moving forward, even after the health crisis is over? Are there any kind of strategies or pivots that you've made that you think you're going to continue to employ going forward? I believe that Leah, you mentioned to-go is certainly going to be sticking around, and Mallory, you said the online sales component has definitely been eye-opening.
Right, we're probably going to stick with delivery direct to consumer. I don't know if we'll do it in the same exact way that we're doing now. We might have to increase the delivery minimums, for example, or decrease the delivery range just to be able to accommodate it moving forward. But that is definitely something that I think will be a permanent change to our business model. I think just the general idea of doing less with more, this is really kind of tested to see, we've really had to use our resources as much as possible. And so there's just kind of a culture and some strategy that comes with that I think we'll be sticking with, just trying to, reduce cost, reduce hours, reduce operations, and maximize the sales within that time. And to Mel's question, hi Mel, earlier about, influences or other brand reach out, we have certainly thought about a lot of that. We are just so afraid to spend money on anything outside of, direct getting a consumer in the door right now, that it's tough to, we are certainly thinking about it, but are kind of afraid to do anything too much that would require more resources.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody else have any kind of new moves that they've made that they think are going to be sort of longer lasting once all this is through?
Yeah, I think like you were saying, just about doing more with less. I mean, I think we'll be hesitant to spend a lot of money on things moving forward, at least in the very short term. Mm-hmm. And, I think, again, doing things like trunk shows and finding ways where we can, while continuing to support the brands we carry, but also making sure that we're not taking a huge financial risk in the short term, just trying to get creative with the products we offer. So whether it's virtual trunk shows or, one day only sales or something like that, I think we'll have to be a little more nimble in the type of things we offer. But I do think it's a good opportunity, at least for our customers, to get certain things that we wouldn't normally carry in the store, and maybe learn a little bit more about some of the brands that we have.
Great. We've had a couple more questions come in. I want to make sure I get all these answered in here before we move on to this sort of point where we're talking about getting back to normal. Kevin Tracy asked, do you think that empathetic businesses have an edge right now, that honestly trying to help the community is good for business as well? You all have been doing good things. Believe me, I'm not,
Yes, I mean, I think it always has been in DC. I think, especially with, we have a large millennial population among our staff and among our clientele, and I think millennials care about causes, and they want to know that they're doing something to do good. And so I think it always has, but even more so now probably. Though again, resources are tight, so it's hard to give to the community right now when you're just trying to stay alive in some cases. But doing what we can within our means, like helping staff and those kind of things, I think people do care about, and being more outward about that, probably more so than normal as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I know it's a lot of businesses, you're set up in such a way that, trying to maximize your profits, but finding ways to support causes you believe in. And, sometimes there is that doing well by doing good model of, hey, you're giving back to the community, and as a direct or indirect result, you're doing better as a business. People think of you as a good actor in the community. And I think, if there's a commonality here, one of them is certainly the fact that you're all seen as responsible businesses in the sort of the DC market space. So appreciate that.
I mean, I think there's like a big difference between like old businesses and new businesses, and is that like, I think it's sort of built into our DNA, our values, and to do well. I think sort of the old way of doing things was that it was like you had a charitable arm of the business that sort of worked totally aside or adjacent to your primary business. And I think at least the way we've tried to think through things, I see it a lot with my peers, and I know all the people that are on this panel, is that's sort of the way our values are very much built into the way we do things. So when it was like pushed to a trying moment, like of course we rallied around our values. So I think that's just a big difference between the old way of doing business and sort of big business for a small business. So again, I've been just so taken aback by how everyone has rallied. I mean, I know when this first started, I was on a Slack chain with Mallory and a lot of other small business owners that were immediately rallying, communicating, and sort of the camaraderie that was just so easy among all of us. And so I've just sort of, both businesses to consumers, but also businesses to businesses, I think it's been pretty amazing to see everyone rally for each other. And again, I think it's because that's sort of built into the way we do things.
That's great. One other question that came in, and this, I guess, maybe might be the other commonality among this group. Ann Pellicciato said, what's been your key to maintaining your cool, so to speak, as leaders, being focused and measured versus scrambling in this fear-driven time? I think everyone's done a pretty good job of having a level head on this panel. So that's, I think, very admirable in these times.
I bring my dogs to work.
There you go. Dogs are helpful. Get outdoors.
Dogs are the
safely. We had just scaled up our corporate team. We were planning to open 3 stores this year. So we had 7 people above the 3 founders that were on our corporate team, ready to sort of roll out all these stores. So I think the key for us and the ability for us to maintain our cool was, one, relying on the collaborative vision of everybody, and trusting that the team we built was able to sort of be agile in the new environment, but also letting everyone sort of thrive in their sort of distinct domains, and that, we had trusting our original instincts and why we built the team the way we built it, letting everyone sort of do their thing. And again, that's been allowed everyone to, even virtually, for the most part, completely flip our business model upside down and in a weekend. And, we're now cash flow positive, and almost have the entire team working. So, it's, again, I think it was just a huge reliance on our team. And a lot of that was sort of built on years of trust, and then letting sort of folks, work as in their own lanes as sort of in the new reality.
I think there's a lot of comfort for me, at least personally, knowing that this is impacting every single person, and I'm not alone in my struggles as a business owner. And so when I find myself going down that path of feeling really bad for myself right now, I mean, I've relied very, very, very heavily on a lot of other local business owners, whether it's just like, I need a mental health check-in and I'm losing it a little, or just like, hey, how are you managing X, Y, and Z? I think it's been really comforting, like Nick was saying, to know that, a lot of people are in this, and the DC community, I don't know if it's just here or in other places, has really rallied behind each other and helped each other out. And, I think at the end of the day, if my problems are like, I'm having trouble fulfilling orders, that's a fantastic problem to have right now. And so, just putting it into perspective and knowing that a lot of people are struggling, but thankfully, because we're small, we're able to be nimble, and, it's a challenge, and it can be fun if you make it fun, just trying to figure out how to adapt to the new normal and pivot. And I think thankfully all of us here are doing a really good job of that. But yeah, I would say the main thing is just reliance on other people who are in similar situations.
Yeah. Jeff, any thoughts? Are you going to say have a drink? Is that the answer?
That's one key answer. Yeah. Also for me, it's kind of relative. I've got 2 young kids, and a lot of the folks in our community are young families too. So that's one way for us kind of all to bond is that, my goodness, if this rye mash doesn't finish fermenting in 5 days, it's not the end of the world, but I've got a screaming 4-year-old in the background, and that I can't calm her down. So that's what's keeping most of my attention mental attention. And this is kind of not in the front of my mind as much as it probably should be. And that helps also with my own perspective on what's important. So I know not everyone's sharing the same experiences, but I'm glad that there are other people who are also going as crazy as I am.
Yeah, I think that's, having that perspective. It's not an easy thing. It's very easy to tell people to, take a break, step back a little bit, but, easier said than done. So, all right, now I have a fairly big, wide open question. You can kind of pick it up wherever you think, but we're talking about reopening now, trying to get back to normal. Do you have any hopes or expectations along these lines? What do you see? I know it's hard to know what next week is going to look like, but do you have any thoughts on the sort of progress getting back to whatever the new normal is going to be? It's a big one.
So as an on-premise brew pub, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but we're just going on best assumptions right now, looking at what other states' regulations are doing and what we think we might see down the pipeline here. And our sense is that we're gonna, operate as much as we can within what we think is gonna be new guidelines for quite some time. So we're thinking that on-premise dining will become a thing again, but bar service, bar culture, I think probably won't for quite some time. So I'm looking to having conversations with our bartenders about retraining. Are you up for serving? Are you up for delivery? If we start around delivery, those kind of conversations are happening now. How we're going to work the staff if we don't have room for everyone. There's going to be some self-selection, I think, with our staff, and that some people are not going to want to come back so soon, and some people are and up for anything. And so I think that'll also help if there is reduced need in terms of staffing.
I mean, we, again, like I said, we were planning to open, few stores in central business downtown. So I think for us, we have a couple signed leases versus not pursuing those leases. And that's sort of what we're spending a lot of our time and energy on right now, is sort of diving into what the work landscape looks like post COVID, what the new normal looks like. Are people going to continue to telework? What is the density? I mean, density is the first metric we look at when we're looking at new locations. And we go to highest density areas. So obviously it doesn't bode well. So I think we're looking at new footprints. There's obviously going to be an explosion in ghost kitchens and delivery models. The problem right now is the cost structure is not super conducive. So, I think for us, it's a little bit of wait and see. The landscape is just so uncertain right now. So I think it's pursuing now, and then I think buying us time so we can understand sort of the landscape moving forward. And once sort of things start to normalize a bit again, understanding again sort of what the impact this has had, so we can make smarter long-term strategic decisions about our plan. But it's going to be a giant shift in the way we do things, and again, sort of relying on the team to navigate it as smartly as we can.
Right. All right. Well, I know we're nearing the end of our normal sort of panel section, so I'm going to just have a couple of closeout questions. This is a bit of a feel-good one. Do you have any other DC area businesses that you think are doing a particularly good job right now? Is there anybody you want to give a shout out for being particularly thoughtful or, innovative with what they're doing? I'll give you a second on it. Should have given you a heads up, but.
A small one, but I ordered a takeout from Tico, and with it came a little 10% discount for the next order and a little note from the owner that just said thank you for supporting us during this time. And that was something I wanted to steal and do it here.
Hopefully they wouldn't mind. Yeah, it's a nice gesture just to show how appreciative that owners are, right? I mean, you all know just every order that comes in, how nice it is to see it. Mallory, go ahead.
I ordered from Republic Restoratives last week, which they are also producing hand sanitizer. It came to my door in an hour. I don't know how, but it did. And I've always just been, I've been inspired by businesses that are getting things quickly and again, they're remaining nimble and communicating throughout the ordering process. And I think they've done a good job of being very transparent about, the good and the bad of what's going on, whether it's, furloughing some of their staff or bringing them back or where their money's going. So I've liked watching what they're doing.
That's great. Nick, Jeff, I'll give you a chance.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I would say Number One Sons. They make ferments and sell them at farmers markets across the city, and they pretty quickly mobilized and started a grocery bundling service. They're selling about 12 producers, farmers, makers, and doing now up to 1,200 deliveries a week. So it was a pretty amazing pivot they made, and they're carrying product at a really low cost to producers. So it was able for all of us to sort of reach a new audience, that was really meaningful, and especially in this landscape where people were seeking out grocery in a new way. And so that's been tremendously valuable to us, but also I think, a bunch of farmers. It's sort of a diversity of businesses. So big kudos to them, Number One Sons.
Nick, I got your hummus from Number One Sons last week. It was delicious.
Yeah, this is Jeff. There's a local restaurant cafe here in Tacoma Park where I live, the Girl on the Vine, that's been really quick in adapting, and they've used to just be focused on cocktails, lunch and dinner, and now they did have some to go wine and beer, and now they're becoming almost a small grocery store. They've been able to source some flowers from local mills, some fruit from some of the local producers, and they've just kind of really rearranged their business model. And yesterday, my wife and I put in a pretty big order, and it was here in about 45 minutes after we ordered it too. So they've been, it seems small businesses in general and across the board can be super nimble, and that's what is allowing the successful ones now to be able to remain successful. So that's one of the benefits of being small and agile, like everyone's talked about today. Yeah,
Girl and Vine have been, they've been fantastic, promoters of other people's products. I bought entirely too much beer and wine from them a few weeks ago, and somehow it's gone. So I guess just being home all the time. All right, so one last question I'm going to have for everybody before we get into the Q&A section here. If you could share just one piece of information, one anecdote, one story about what this has been like for you all, just something that people might not see, sort of give everybody just that little bit of information about what it is being a small business owner in these extremely weird times. I don't need anything scandalous, just, something just kind of an insight into what it is to be a small business owner right now.
I'll show you where I'm currently sitting, which is my guest room, which is where I have all of the product from the store. So my business is from my house now, and thankfully jewelry is pretty small, but yeah, we're I'm thankful that we have an extra room in our home to be able to send it out, but I'm fully operating from my house, and our personal like postal worker who delivers to our house has been just an absolute saint and is picking up hundreds of packages from our house, and she doesn't have to do that, and she's just doing it gracefully and very, very kindly, and is keeping my business going. So thank you, Lisa, and people who are ordering.
I think that's a good lesson, just knowing that no matter how professional the sort of front of a business is, it's often comes down to a couple of people working very hard to keep it running, sometimes out of their own room, and relying on some other people to support them as well. So that's great. How about everybody else?
So I'll say, just doing some of the basic processes that I'm used to doing, like payroll and entering in our sales for the week. It's painful. It really hurts when you have to, for us, we had to lay off about 55 employees between the two places. And every time I do payroll, I have to check those names and say, not getting paid, not getting paid, not getting paid. And it's literally a painful thing to do when you're entering sales and you're comparing that to last year or what you need to break even. It's scary, it's terrifying. But at the same time, just last week, I bought out my business partner. It's something that I've been working on for a year. And, the terms changed a bit with this, but I'm still focused, still determined, and still have faith in our employees and our business. So still some exciting highlights too. Hopefully exciting, hopefully not also terrifying. But we'll see.
Mostly exciting, 80-20. Nick, how about you?
I've gotten really good at making margaritas. That's what I got. No, I mean, I don't know. I think it's like everyone's saying. I think every day is a whirlwind of emotion. I have a young kid at home as well, so balancing, work and home life, and I think for me, creating space. One piece of advice I have that's been extremely valuable for me is just sort of creating space every day for a bit of mental health. So biking or running or getting outdoors. And so I think, I've forced that hour a day, even prioritizing over work sometimes, just to keep myself sane, knowing that this is, this is a marathon. And, I think that's the hardest part of small business period is that it's a race that just, when you open is the very beginning. So, and the journey to open is always extremely hard. So sort of preserving your own personal resources so that you can be in it for the long haul at full capacity. So I've been trying to sort of create that space for myself to, so that I can stay strong and keep going.
Yeah, that's very important. It should be, it should be brought up in every discussion. Small business owners need to make sure they take care of themselves because they're no good to their, to their business if they're not able to, do what they need to do. All right. And Jeff, we'll wrap up with you on this portion. What do you got?
Sure. So we talked about supply disruptions earlier. I think one thing that this is forcing people to explore more deeply is where our stuff is coming from and how it's getting to us. And I'll just give one short anecdote. So I'm rehabilitating this orchard in Western Maryland. I've turned my front yard here in Tacoma Park into a nursery where I'm raising baby apple trees. And I've been doing this for about the last 6 years. So there's about 200 apple trees in my front yard that are between 2 and 6 feet tall. And I've had maybe 5 neighbors over those last 6 years ask me what they are. And since we've been all stuck at home, almost everyone who walks by our house is asking about them. How you propagate fruit trees? Could I have one? Can you teach me? So it's forcing people to understand a little bit more about not only where our food comes from, where our alcohol comes from, where everything that we're buying comes from.
Yeah, I think if there's a silver lining in this, and I'm sure there are many, just people being more thoughtful about what they're buying from whom, knowing that buying local, from their neighbors is important and makes a difference. So, well, with that, I will give everyone a chance to, who's listening in, to offer up any questions, we can do a quick little Q&A. If you want to type in questions to the Q&A box, we'll do our best to answer them before we wrap this thing up. Feel free. And in the meantime, I will say, panelists, thank you all for making the time. I know the end of a long week, first of all, I know you don't exactly adhere to the traditional 9 to 5, Monday to Friday work week that some of the other folks do, but really appreciate you making the time at the end of this week to go do this. And, you know, it's really, really appreciated sharing your insights with everybody listening in. So we'll give it a few more seconds to see if there's anybody else has thoughts, but otherwise I think we can call it there. So with that, I will say big thanks to the Heurich House for taking the time to put this together. We really learned a lot. Just, it was great to hear what small businesses are doing at these times. Mallory, Leah, Nick, and Jeff, thank you for everything you do for the community, and looking forward to you know, having you around in the DC area for a long time. And I will end with Anne just chimed in and said, could you provide beer next time? So everybody hopefully gets to go enjoy a nice drink to wrap up this week. So thank you all for your time, and yeah, really appreciate it. Have a great weekend, everyone.